Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 7 of Isekai Pharmacy. Last episode, obviously, there wasn't a lot of pharmaceutical stuff to talk about. Mostly some water safety stuff, which is just relevant when you're talking to an Australian. So this week, we've found out that the church has caught up to him, and, obviously they think he's kind of a big deal, considering the impact he's had on the world with, his medication and his magic use and things like that. So they've caught up to him. Right now, doesn't look too great. And as we proceed on through the episode, we'll see some of the ramifications of this particular conflict, which does include some more things that are more applicable to a hospital setting, I would say, for a pharmacist. So we'll have a chat about that for a little bit. And then at the end, there's a little bit about, inter-pharmacy competition, which I can speak to a little bit in terms of like modern pharmaceutical models in terms of how pharmacies are set up and things like that, and provide some insight at least to the modern ways of doing things. So we'll get started here. This is the beginning part where the church kind of bishop or inquisition has caught up to him. They're fighting our young protagonist farmer, and he's about to show them what for. Let's get into it. So a little bit of magic. Pretty good. Yeah, so fire obviously doesn't exist without oxygen. So a great way to put out any fires to deprive it of oxygen. Not always water. Water is not always the best thing. I'm pretty sure there's common knowledge at this point. But if you try to chuck water on like an oil fire, that's not going to go very well, which is why you usually have chemical fire extinguishers for especially oil or liquid or electrical fires. Usually you have a chemical fire extinguisher where the chemical inside is like a powder called monoammonium phosphate, I believe. And basically that helps snuff out all the oxygen, dampens all the fire and the heat, rather than a water-based solution. So then you don't have the water spitting everywhere and you create, more damage than you necessarily need it to be. So he suffered a leg wound when he fell from his horse. Before they decided he was the holy deity. Pentecost. Although it is hilarious that apparently what's the word? That apparently they still do ritualistic suicide for, transgressions, even though this is supposed to be a Western medieval type of thing. Not Japanese, but So we've got a leg fracture. So open fracture in his, so the bone is sticking out from his skin. Is what they mean by open fracture. It is hilarious that his divine eye stuff lets him like trial and error solutions, trial and error treatments. Not him. So if you've got a fractured leg, obviously that's something for a surgeon to fix, not necessarily a pharmacist. A pharmacist can assist by preparing anesthesia and antibiotics to help with any of the prophylaxis of infection, that kind of thing, and to make sure the patient feels no pain and is calm and stable during the surgery. But a general fracture definitely should not be treated by a pharmacist by themselves. The best we can probably do, if you do have to go to a community pharmacy and that's all you've got, is we can probably set the fracture a little bit, try and help immobilize it so you stop moving it and make the fracture worse, and then maybe give you some antibiotics or painkillers once we've identified the issue. But those kinds of things, yeah, you need to see a doctor. A pharmacist cannot help you with that. Unless, of course, they have the divine eye of diagnosis where they can just, throw out different treatment ideas and apparently get the right one. So we'll see what he does. My guess is that he's probably going to just administer antibiotics and anesthesia, whether that's a injectable like IV or whether it's oral, I don't know. But that's probably all he's going to be able to do until he finds this world's equivalent of like a surgeon or something to try and get the bone set. Because if it's an open fracture, then it's come through the skin. So it's not pretty, to say the least. He does need like a medical bed as well. Some way to put the patient in a better place to work on him.
ノバルト医薬大の最新手術データでも術後はほぼ運任せ。それに感染リスクを低く保てるのはこれからあなたの骨折の処置をする。まず感染予防用の抗菌薬を飲んでもらった後、背中から麻酔を注射。その後傷口を徹底洗浄。内部の汚染箇所を切除して正常化。
Yeah, so antibiotics first makes sense, prophylaxis. Then anesthesia. Yeah, okay, I can see that. If the antibiotics are oral, then he probably wants the patient awake to be at least able to, eat it before he administers anesthesia and knocks the patient out. I am a little bit confused as to why he has to administer anesthesia through the spine. I mean, if you want, it is one way of doing it if you want general anesthesia, but like you can do IV and that's less of a risk of permanent injury. But then again, I'm only a pharmacist, right? I'm not a surgeon or an anesthetist or anything like that. So if anyone else has, better insight than I do, I just think that going straight to spinal tap your patient is a little bit overkill. Like you could do it IV, and I mean it'll take longer. Don't get me wrong, but it'd be a much less risky way of doing general anesthesia. Maybe he's just looking to do it from like waist down type of anesthesia, but I don't think that's the best course of action. But this is anime, so what do I know? Yeah, and then cutting out, infected tissue and foreign matter and stuff like that. All makes sense. Cleaning the wound, stitching up the wound. I don't know if you can stitch it up if it's an open fracture. Again, I might be interpreting it wrong. But like with the way that I understand open fractures, like if the bone's sticking out, bro, like you can't. You can stitch the rest of the wound, I guess, around it that's not got the bone in it, but like you need some way of covering it at least. I agree. And some way of bandaging it and then immobilizing, fixing it. So then the fracture can't get any worse. But I don't know about this particular procedure. Someone with surgical experience, probably hop in the comments, let me know. If I'm completely wrong and I'm misinterpreting everything, please let me know. I'd love to learn about it, but I don't think that you can stitch this wound back together. Although I do agree you need, bandages, something to cover it, stop other foreign matter from getting inside, and then something to immobilize the leg, like a splint, long piece of wood, that kind of thing on the outside, wrap it tightly around the leg so then it's, straight and he can't do any more damage to his bone once you've administered the antibiotics and all the foreign matter and infected tissue wouldn't have started yet, but you get what I mean. Like foreign matter and all the rest of it has been taken out. Ironically, the thing he can do is conduct fixation of the fracture. So he can. It won't be glamorous. It won't be good, and it'll need to be done again, later down the road. But what he has to do, minimum here, is at least put a splint or something to immobilize the leg so he can't move it. Something to keep it straight so then the bone, there's no more damage to the bone, or less damage can be done to the bone as possible. So yeah, some sort of splint or something. And then someone else, a surgeon, can, you know, fix the bone, put it in place permanently and screw it all together and make sure it's permanently fixated. But he needs to do something about the fracture. Like, you can't just leave it hanging. That's never gonna end very well.
始めてもいいか?
Yeah,
you can't really defy God, can you? So rudimentary anti-infection gear. So he's got the mask, the cap to keep his hair out of his face. The sweat as well is part of that mask. So then he's got less of the breathing stuff. And, you know, sort of the surgical gown, the rest of it. Very rudimentary. And obviously in this kind of setup, it's not, his scrubs are definitely not going to be sterile. So, you know, but it's something. It's some rudimentary kind of infection control. Yeah, bupivacaine is a anesthetic for spinal tapping. I still don't think you should be spinal tapping. Like, if you get this injection site wrong, you will risk your patient just becoming permanently paralyzed. Like, just do an IV drip, man. You'll get gas. Give him laughing gas. Just not him, bro. But anyway, you know, that's how it is. I'm also very curious as to where he got, like, the medical equipment, where he got his syringes and all the rest of it.
我慢してくれよ.
So maybe he did it just because he has the patient awake to tell him if things are wrong. But, like, still. Where did he get this stuff? Where is he selling all the surgery stuff?
放っておけばこの人は確実に死ぬ。薬師も医師も関係ない。ここには今俺しかいないんだ。
Just because there's no one else but you, yes, that's true, but, like, you can definitely do more harm than good. And you know that there is at least some, you know, help available fairly close by. Like, you just left the capital with that chick, right? Like, I get it. You know, emergency first aid is an important skill to have, but like I said last week, you shouldn't feel obligated to try to kind of move out of your training, right, of what you're comfortable. Because if you do that, then you start spreading misinformation and you'll do things wrong, right? It's much better to get experts in that know what they're doing, so then you can get the correct information and get it right. Particularly when you're dealing with people's lives or their legs or whatever you want to call it. Medical stuff in general. So, yeah. This, I think he's putting, it's amped up for dramatic effect. Obviously, you know, this is still anime, it's still entertainment, but when you know you've got civilization like 3, 4, 5 hours down the road, like, they were not riding long down that road. Like, you can get him there. You just need to make sure he's comfortable. But yeah, sure. Also, I want to point out there is no way that a research pharmacist would know how to perform surgeries on a human being. Just because you've done surgeries on lab animals and things like that does not mean that you are qualified to perform surgeries on human beings. Okay? Like, this is nothing, bro. You can't, no. Nah.
応急の処置でどこまで助けられたかわからないけれど、今のところ君たちの体調は無事だよ。彼を神殿に運んでおいてくれ。後で術後の様子を確認して必要な処置をするから。我々に罰を下すどころか、かようなお慈悲を賜るなどとは、なんと。
I'm surprised he couldn't just do some magic bullshit, actually. But I guess he hasn't been doing magic bullshit for the rest of it. Even though he's done this emergency first aid, I still think his leg's not going to be quite right. It was very common in medieval days where even if you would keep your leg from a fracture or things like that, it wouldn't set properly or things wouldn't happen correctly. So you would still end up with like a limp or like a slightly shorter leg. So then you wouldn't ever walk quite the same. And that's like in the best case scenario in medieval times, right? Obviously now these days with the technology and the knowledge that we have, that percentage has risen dramatically. But in this particular time period that we are emulating, apparently, I doubt he walks very well unless there is some magic bullshit going on. Which, there could be the holy inquisitors and church people, so I'm sure they've got something up their sleeve.
そういうのはいいよ。意の道に携わる者として、ただの人間として、俺は俺にできる最善を選ん。
Incorrect. You're just because you're someone who follows medicine, bro. Like the top motto is do no harm, or do less harm than good. Like your benefit to risk ratio as a healthcare professional, the benefits should always pretty much outweigh the risks, wherever possible. And people will be like, oh, what about internal illness, that kind of thing? Well, the risk is death, right? So the benefit to anything you do is pretty good if you can avoid death. So the prime directive of healthcare is to try to do less harm than good. So doing the most good is not necessary, is what I'm trying to get at, all right? Doing enough good so then the process keeps moving along is enough, right? Because then you know that you've got your operating procedures and other people can help to get the best outcome. Doing what you think the most good is out of your skill set and then going beyond that skill set that's not a great idea.
それだけだ。それよりも今日のことは他言無用で頼む。
薬神様の仰せのままに。
I wish I got worshipped like a god. That'd be nice. Several months later. So, by several months later, the guy's probably healed up, at least most of the way. So, I don't know. We'll probably see him in these scenes. I would assume so.
新任の新館長様が就任のご挨拶にわざわざうちに？
サロモンと申します。以後お見知りおきを。
Oh, he got promoted.
こちらはぜひ皆様でどうぞ。
I don't know why he got promoted for.
いただきます。お元気そうで。
おかげさまで誠にご迷惑をおかけいたしました。
What a dude.
この恩は筆舌に尽くしがたく。
それはもういいですって。異端審問官から帝都教区の神殿新館長ということはご出世ですか？
ええ、あなた様のおそばにお仕えするために数々の手続きを経てこの度叙任されました。
ああ、詳細は聞かないでおこう。
着任にあたり報告書を大神殿に送っておきました。
What a guy.
サンフルーブ教区に異端者の形跡なしと。
え、